Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. You are listening and watching simultaneously, perhaps, Silicon Curtain, a channel you know and love, and also this humble little channel, Rashkin Report in English, which is an offshoot of my more popular channel, Rashkin Report. My name is Yuri Rashkin. I live in Wisconsin in the United States. I'm originally from Russia, or as I say, I was born in Mordor. And I've lived in the United States since my parents brought me here many, many years ago. And I'm excited to be joined every week by Jonathan Fink, who is the voice, the host of Silicon Curtain, really a channel that I just grown to enjoy watching and seeing great faces and interesting viewpoints and generally healthy conversations just take place on that channel. So very recommend Silicon Curtain for anybody who hasn't subscribed yet. Please do so. You will be better informed. I am so sick and tired of people who say they're interested in news and then it turns out they're just conspiracy theorists. This is not one of those shows. Jonathan, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic introduction. And of course, your channel is you're being humble there. It is not modest at all. It has a fantastic following and does tremendous work as well. And I was about to say, you must count your blessings every morning that your parents were enlightened enough to take you to the United States from Russia. Maybe at the moment that doesn't feel like the best choice.
You know, it's remarkable because my parents have passed on many years ago, and back when we first left Soviet Union as Soviet Jews traveling from Soviet Union to America, our first stop was Vienna. And I said, Mother, this is amazing. I mean, I didn't realize that Vienna and Austria were really on a kind of a different level from everything. I just knew this was really not Soviet Union. And I said, why go anywhere else? Why can't we just stay here? And my mother, in her infinite wisdom, said, Yuri, Russian Soviet tanks can be here in a matter of hours. And so we kept going, you know, as our plan was originally to reunite with family in America. And that was I think, to me, a highlight of how my parents and their decision to leave Russia at times seems wiser than ever, and then wiser some more. And then you kind of go, but really, was that a good idea? And yes, of course, leaving Russia is always a good idea. In fact, the constant conversation of Russian emigres about when did we lose Russia? Yes, I mean, we can say 1993 or any other date, but in reality, you people never had Russia. So don't pretend. The only thing you can do with Russia is leave. So I'm very forever grateful to my parents. But yes, now I'm a proud citizen of the United States. This is the only citizenship I have. And I'm a local elected official in Rock County here in Wisconsin, and I'm involved in my community. And to me, what's happening right now in the United States is eerily familiar to what I heard about how Russia was lost after a brief de-thaw or a thaw in 90s, and just general countries that go from being a democracy to being not so much more of a performative democracy. And so on that level, I think being in the United States these days and having that Russian background is a kind of it's an interesting experience because people around me so often don't have any reference point and don't understand what could happen, how people respond under pressure. The fact that Americans, I think, are surprised that we in America decided to be so quiet about how our president is discussing whether he wants to be a dictator or not, how we're just kind of taking it, laying down and trying to figure out how we can get hurt less. That's normal. That's what people do in these types of situations when they understand first fear, because that's how bullying is set up. That's how bully operates. It's just that I think what Americans have to discover, and what I feel my main takeaway is the importance of trust. That you have to have a trust in yourself. then you build trust in your community, then you build trust in, in beyond that. And that's how healthy economies and thriving communities and thriving countries emerge. And we're going the other way right now in a spiral that needs to get stopped by people who stand up to this fear. And we see Governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, who just gave a really rousing speech. And we see Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who gives regular, major appearances and trolls Trump the best he can. So we'll see where it happens, because how it goes, because there is no America that's going to come in and save us. We are America. We are the United States. So we have to solve this ourselves. Germans are not going to save us. And
that's what I put at the end of my last video, which was about Europe waiting for a consensus, waiting for the US to return to the side of strength and morality in foreign policy. And that's not going to happen, at least for a considerable amount of time. Yeah, and I said that phrase as well. No one is coming to save Europe. So if Europe wants to save itself, it needs to save Ukraine first, and then it needs to figure out how it can save itself.
Yes, and we have a comment here saying, I like Yuri, but when will we see Yuri Filshtinsky again? I love that guy. Yes, I love Yuri Filshtinsky. He's a great friend of mine, and just a wonderful person, and it's wonderful that people mention him. First of all, he does appear on Rashkin Report in Russian, and we probably could ask him to join us, and we're thinking of different people.
Certainly could, yeah. Right. That'd be a good one to start, I think. Yeah.
Right. So I think, keep writing in comments. We'll see who we can line up for better conversations in the future. Yeah, but in that sense, to kind of transition back to Ukraine, last night, there were ballistic rockets that were shot at Kiev. And on one hand, Putin is experiencing the absolutely satanical joy here, because he got some people, he got some children. I'm sure he feels like, Peskov said the mission is accomplished, so everything is going well, and they're trying to terrorize Ukrainians into surrendering. But it's a fail, A, because they're not getting Ukrainians to surrender, and 2, because Ukrainians are doing a hell of a job destroying Russian capacity for oil gas refineries, which are, last I heard, are 17% down. Granted, 83% more to go, but at what percent will Putin realize that his war machine is not functioning? I think that attacking civilians is disgusting and despicable, but it's not going to get Putin any closer to his dream of owning Ukraine.
It's certainly not. And I think Ukraine already a couple of years ago, I think they saw the Trump bandwagon coming, and certainly they would have strategically thought about what to do in the event of a Trump presidency. They had to think about that longer, further and deeper than anybody else, I think, was doing, because the implications are so dire for them. So we can see that in the Flamingo missile, we can see that within the drone investments they've been making, these don't appear overnight. It's taken many, many, many months, if not many years, to get to this point. So I think they've made strategic calculations based on a Trump, a worst case scenario, and a worst case scenario Trump, if you kind of know what I mean there. If we then fast forward that through, they can see the division within Europe. Now, Europe gets sort of canned all round from everybody all the time, including Trump. The fact is, Europe is providing more funds for Ukraine now than the US did at the height of its commitment under Biden. European production of ammunition shells is up 6-fold in the last year. So when people say Europe's doing nothing, this is unfortunately really giving some oxygen to Russian propaganda here. When Trump says Europe's doing nothing, we're doing everything, this is a flat out blatant lie. So I think it's useful to kind of be balanced here. But Ukrainians be looking at this saying, yes, we're very grateful for that, but it's not doing enough. So how do we, 1, survive? How do we, 2, have something that aligns with some kind of victory? And 3, how do we have something that aligns with justice and future security? they, I think, will come to the conclusion that what you have to do is have a siege of Moscow, not physically surrounding it in the medieval sense, but you have to cut off its resources. Firstly, to cut off the resources to the war machine, the logistics that you've talked about there. But secondly, you have to start taking out the logistics and energy nodes that are coming into Moscow. Because Moscow is, as we discussed before, Moscow is this tumor. It soaks up resources, it soaks up energy, it soaks up all the talent of the country, but that's not where the wealth is created. All the wealth is dug out of the ground in the east and the north in areas which are entirely impoverished, and it requires huge logistical routes and pipelines to bring these resources in for processing and then to turn that into money, resources, food, etc., which is then consumed by this monster that is Moscow. Well, Ukraine's strategy, I think, is not going to be explicitly stating this, but it is going to be moving to strangulate the Russian capital and its vast population, especially into the run-up to autumn or winter. That is what I think they have to do in order to meet those criteria I talked about, victory, justice, not retribution, but restitution, and these kind of things. And if they don't do these, then we're going to see a steady bleeding out through next year. I think Ukraine and its leadership will do what is required. And that's where I think we're going to be heading over the coming weeks and months, because Trump's not going to end the war. In fact, I think, throw this back to you, I think Trump has been providing quite consciously distraction and deflection from what's really going on. What's really going on is the US is not providing any aid to Ukraine. It is now removing that aid, which Biden mandated, both physical equipment, but also the permissions in terms of targeting data, removing the permissions to use US systems to hit Russian territory, including HIMARS, etc. And it is either trying to distract allies or actively deflect them from supporting Ukraine. This is what I think is really going on. The rest is this extraordinary kind of shiny puppet show of confusion, which of course you've titled the episode as.
It's true, because it's what we're seeing. I think that, of course, if you're a Trump believer, witness the Trump witnesses, then you see whatever Trump tells you to see. But if you are just following information, and then I think it's admirable. Thank you, Jonathan, for your laying out of this complex issue so comprehensively and pretty briefly, honestly, considering how much you have covered. I think that, first of all, with Yuri Filshtinsky's, his approach would be that nothing is going to change until we bomb Moscow. But I like your definition of Moscow in a way being kind of almost metaphorical, which is true. We have to hit metaphorical Moscow every day. And I think that is clear. And Ukrainian approach of trying to drain Russian resources and by hitting their facilities seems to be making an impact. And I think that Ukrainians certainly enjoy the pictures of this burning, oil refineries. And I think that in the future, when Ukrainians are going to be celebrating the holiday of defeating Russia, children should have little sparklers to celebrate the burning Russian factories. I think that'll be really great. But I think that security guarantee of Ukraine lies, first of all, in well-armed Ukraine and Ukrainian army, because that's, I think, what everybody's consensus is. And part of well-armed Ukraine is working with allies. And we've also heard this, but my understanding is, and I am not the world's biggest specialist in ammunition, that Flamingo has a lot of German involvement in it, and it's a big part of what makes it work. But that's great. That's fine. So that means that allies are working together. And when you say that Ukraine's better been preparing for this for years, I sure hope so too, because all the time that happened up until now is all the time we have to prepare for what's going to be happening next. And now we have Trump for 1,200 days, because he is forbidden by constitution to run for re-election. So we have to at least presume possibility that he's going to be there, that even when Democrats win the House of Representatives next year, that impeachment will not result in his removal. Third impeachment, which is what I think everybody expects to occur. So the security of Ukraine is its armed forces, but also I hate to say it, I feel like nuclear weapons. I think that my take on this is, yes, in a world where with a functioning NATO, functioning alliances, and functioning United States of America, rewind back to the beginning of this conversation, then I think then nuclear proliferation is a big threat. But in the world where everyone can only expect their own army to protect them, and whether it's a democratic government or regime from a change is nuclear weapons, then I guess that's what that means. And we know that Ukraine is the factory, so to say, behind Russian and Soviet nuclear weapons to a large extent. So this is something that is very much in Ukraine's wheelhouse. It's more of a matter of everybody else going, no, let's not, undo the Budapest Memorandum. Hello. But I think that perhaps at any real negotiations that may occur, the conversation about allowing Ukraine to have nuclear weapons, I think, has to be a key part for Ukraine in assuring its own, security guarantees, because to expect security guarantees from Donald J. Trump is kind of a losing proposition. He's been sued many hundreds of times because he doesn't pay his bills. So, and that's just the beginning. So I think guaranteeing Trump is not reasonable. So I think it's the strong Ukrainian army and nuclear weapons. And I know I'm kind of going far there, but I'm just, I have no position that has anything to do with national defense, but I just feel like we're kind of at that stage of the game. And I think that also brings me to a point that I feel is important to make, which is when you look at the United States and you see the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Yes, Democrats are much more responsible, and I would say responsible, period, about consequences versus Republican leadership. But at the same time, the choice is between Trump, who is his own national security advisor. Let's not fool ourselves. Marco Rubio is a fig leaf here. The mess on aisle 9 will be cleaned up by a rag named Marco Rubio. But it's that you have either American foreign policy under Trump, which is, hello, Putin, well, what can we get you? Or Jake Sullivan, because I think that Jake Sullivan is as extreme as Democrats are getting. And so I think that either he's going to be, the Secretary of the State with the next administration, or who, because I'm not hearing any voices that are any more active and aggressive and strong than that on the Democratic side, which is mostly concerned itself about what's going on in Israel, period. So I think that this is an important point to just kind of acknowledge in understanding the differences, meaning, once again, it's about Europe, it's about strong Ukrainian army.
This is it. And the nuclear question, I think, is an interesting one, because we have to go back not to these abstract ideas of geopolitics and how it functions, but to how Russia functions. Russia, as you say at the start of the episode, behaves like a bully. And we were talking about that sort of, before we hit record as well. What is, first of all, as my grandma told me, you've got to punch a bully in the face and then they'll leave you alone. That works very well. But also they need to know that you have the capability and the will. Why is it the bully doesn't pick on the big lads? Why is it the bully doesn't pick on those who have some kind of skills like martial arts or whatever? It's because they know they're going to be taken out within 5 seconds. They try to scent weakness. And I think this is what Putin is. He's like the shark trying to scent blood in the water. The trouble is, when it comes to Europe, and of course the US at the moment, that's a very cloudy pool there. You can hardly see the bottom for all the sort of bloodletting that's going on. He senses weakness and he senses fallibility, and of course in those circumstances, attack is what they're going to do, and that's exactly what Putin's going to do. In that strike last night, of primary importance, an apartment block was hit. children were killed, and it's despicable. But in a very symbolic act, the offices of the European Union were damaged, and the British Council was damaged and put beyond reasonable use. This isn't accidental. This is sensing weakness, sensing lack of leadership, sensing lack of any decisive strategy to push back on Russia. And it's deploying aggression with open mockery, because they can take this back. They can take this back to their people. They can take this back to their elites and say, okay, don't even think of trying to depose us, because this is what we've just done with the guys who perhaps you might admire if you're a Democrat, or, you know, in the sort of Navalny kind of camp. Those are the kind of guys you want to project yourself onto and base yourselves on. Well, look at that. We've just smashed up their things, and they're going to do nothing about it. Do you really want to be with those, or do you want to be with us? Like, we're the bad guys. We are the bad guys. We do horrific things, but, you know, we are untouchable at this point. I think that's the kind of signal they're trying to project forward.
I think untouchable is what nuclear weapons get you. I think that the murky water, what is the Russian expression, that they like to catch their fish in murky waters. I think that that's a comfortable environment both for Trump and for Putin. I think that one of the things that I'm starting to see as a news analyst, that I play one on YouTube, is that there is level of news. There's like news that is useless news, that's really not news. And there's there's news that actually is important and relevant. And really, usually Trump's tweets are not the news. But at the same time, it's very tempting to go, well, Trump said, but you almost feel like it's getting boring for you, for me, and for the viewer, because it really, he says all sorts of stuff, it's meaningless. But there is news. And so to me, when you're saying that the European Union building was hit, United Kingdom building was hit, does it mean that United Kingdom is now going to go to war with Russia? Yeah? No?
No, I'd say alas, no. I mean, I don't think we should be going to war directly with Russia. We, you know, we don't want anything that they have. Quite frankly, it's yeah. I mean, yeah, we've got our own stuff. We don't need their shit. But what we should be doing is pushing back hard in Ukraine. And we have fought them before, as someone points out there. I don't think we'll be, you know, creating a little enclave in Arkhangelsk or Murmansk. Not this time. I mean, it's that belongs in the pages of history. But what we can do is help Ukraine push Russia entirely out of its sovereign territories, including Crimea. And that ought to be the strategy. That ought to have been the strategy from day one. And then all the logic should have flowed from that, which is establishing a no-fly zone across Ukraine, helping to build up their armaments industry and their defenses so that they can put Russia back, scaling up even further the sort of training programs for Ukrainian troops, and investing in mass production of our own armaments industry. There are so many things we should have done, could have done actually if we had the will, but haven't. Unfortunately, I don't see at this point that our buildings being smashed up, Putin's spitting in our faces, and obviously he's spitting daily in Trump's face. That doesn't seem to matter there.
I don't know that Putin would be spitting, because he seems to want to protect all his biological material. So yeah, that's, you know, then somebody will probably show up, wipe the off your face.
Yeah, he'll spit, but someone will come and wipe it up and put in a little, you know, bio contained bag. That was the most interesting speculation about why Putin didn't have dinner in Alaska. I think, I don't believe this is the right one, but it's because, you know, if he had dinner, he might have to use the toilet. Oh my goodness. It's quite clear he has a condition. It's becoming clearer that Trump is,
you know, people have been saying
not exactly
Trump,
immortal.
Trump's been wearing a diaper for a long time. So, I mean, there's ways around this.
There are ways around that. And there are ways of spinning the news. I mean, the trouble is when a US leader is physically frail, that doesn't cause everybody to head for the barricades. And, you know, Biden showed that you can carry on in extreme frailty for a very long period of time. It doesn't actually affect the machinery of government. Let's be frank. I mean, all those people on the right who are saying Biden's this, Biden's that, the autopan, blah, blah, blah. No, in a well-functioning democracy, There are systems and processes that allow the country to function despite physical frailty. So we don't all freak out at that. We honestly don't. In Russia, it's very different. Physical frailty, think of it more as a sort of pack of lions. If the head lion, suddenly goes lame or something, well, that's it. He's done. If he can't fight and stay on top, he's done. So physical health and frailty is a death sentence for
Russians
a Russian
actually
leader.
go to the Jungle Book, to Rudyard Kipling, to Akela Has Missed.
Yes.
That is the classic comparison. So kudos to Rudyard Kipling there, Rudyard, for contributing such an important metaphor to Russian political vocabulary dictionary. But yes, whether you are, and it's interesting because it seems to have an impact on Trump as well. He did not for a long time want to discuss the size of his ankles, until it was officially announced. So the situation must have gotten pretty bad. I can't say that I've followed it much, but we saw pictures in different press, and to what extent they didn't want to acknowledge it, because it does send a physical frailty question up. And you have to start talking about it one way or another. And of course, we now know that Donald Trump has these bruises on his hands that are covered sometimes in makeup, sometimes not. And what does this mean? And I think it's a double question that's very different for Russia than for United States, because in Russia, if the Putin is truly in the refrigerator, then it's a dictatorship, closed system. KGB is going to decide, they're going to figure it out. Maybe they'll have double Putins for a long time, who knows. But in the United States, if we have physical frailty, we have vice president who is standing nearby, and as seems to be the case with many administrations, is designed to scare the other party into submission, in a sense that no matter how bad the president is, vice president looks even scarier.
Well, I was going to say, and puts my mind at rest knowing that Vance is one step away from the throne. He's much younger and he's physically fitter. I mean, you can say that.
Side, and so is Elon Musk. I heard that Elon Musk decided not to invest in a third party and instead just invest in J.D. Vance as the heir to this.
Is that really? I haven't heard that one. Is that okay?
So they decided that maybe J.D. Vance is going to be an easier to control vehicle to ride than Donald Trump, who seems to be really just eating out of Putin's hand, and everything else. Whatever, if he's making money, then I guess it's all good. It's really also kind of a statement about capitalism, really, because these people, the concept of gaining all this money is just so important to them, and it's kind of pathetic, really, when you look at it, because what do you need for fun? I need my YouTube channel. I appreciate it. What else? But some people want to have billions and billions and billions of dollars, and okay.
Yeah, I mean, all these little rooms and books and a microphone. Well, there's a few other things I quite like as well. I mean, I always quite liked, the latest Jaguar sporty car or some E-Type. That would be nice. But apart from those slight material desires there, no, certainly. And there's a couple of interesting comments coming through here. I mean, one is probably too crude to read. But basically ask the question, why does Europe cry about the US all the time while, let's put it so mildly, while pandering to Trump? That's not exactly what he wrote there. It's something that would get this video demonetized. And I can see the frustration there. And you get that on MAGA as well. It's like, why are you always, blah, 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 Europe, sponging, etc. Well, first of all, we cry because there are so many lies coming out about what Europe is and isn't doing, and very little of the truth is actually there in the media and Trump's comments. So I think it's right to sort of push back and complain, but the point here is that why doesn't Europe just get on with it? If the US is not a solution to Putin's aggression, then why do we let Trump dominate the headlines? Why do we let Trump, who is now contributing $0 to Ukrainian victory, dictate the agenda and completely dominate the media airwaves? Why do we let that happen? Why do we let Putin and Trump create this sort of huge political distraction and allow ourselves to be distracted by it rather than focusing on a real solution to the problem, which is the understanding that Putin's aggression is not going to go away until he dies, that Russia is going to be a threat until Putin dies. Russia may be a threat long after Putin dies, depending on who takes over. There seems to be a fundamental lack of will, lack of strategy, lack of mental clarity to deal with that problem. What do you do about Russia? Russia that is intent on rebuilding its imperial territories and imperial influence and sees Eurasia, that is the European continent, as its sort of bullpit where it can do whatever it wants. I mean, that's not true. Europe is full of sovereign countries. We should not be allowing Russia to even think for 1 second that it has dominion over our countries and over our geography and our resources. But unfortunately, as you said earlier, politicians, public, the media are just endlessly distracted by the problems that are in front of their nose, not the larger issues.
I think larger issues are kind of scary sometimes. I think that one way that Epstein case in the United States can be looked at is a case about pedophilia and protection of children. But the other side of the story, which I think is very important, is the divide that there is in America, where you have one group of people that are able to do whatever they want and another group of people that can't. And that divide, what do we deal with? Do we want to look at this problem too closely, or is this going to be kind of terrifying? And of course, we have different approaches because Democrats, progressives look at it and say, well, we can't quite fix the inequity. I mean, this is America, there's capitalism, but we can help other people, most people, get better education, get better health care, and at the same time prosper while those people do things they seem to always do and hope that a prosecutor will get to them one day, knowing that really Democrats may be just as disinterested in going way to the top and rather would just settle for helping people, which is not the worst answer considering all the possible options. But on the other hand, the Trump administration, the MAGA approach is to say, this government, it can't do anything well. All we can do is just take parts of it and put in our pocket through taxes and give away taxes. But at the same time, we can use this government to punish people that we don't like. And that's the other thing that this government can do. And so forget education, forget healthcare, forget a social safety net for most people. No, let's go and punish somebody, especially if it looks like who we're punishing are people from the other party, because it's fascinating to watch how opinion about the Epstein case changed when it turned out that instead of mostly Democrats, the list is going to clearly start with Donald Trump. And I think that's part of the reason why it's hard to turn away. Because this clown show that is, turns out that our, president was 10, 15 years best friend of this horrible criminal. And at the same time, he continues to publish these nearly pointless tweets all the time. And he gets involved in every scandal. We had a situation in the United States, when a corporation decided to change its logo, and Trump decided to weigh in and say, no, I like the old logo better, because there was a backlash on the internet or on Fox News or whatever. And it turned out that the corporation bent its to the will of the president. They're going back to the old logo. If he could be that successful with Putin, that would be pretty impressive. But when he is only able to yell at American corporations, it's a clown show that is kind of entertaining to watch and you can't turn away. And finally, he's now also a politician, whether he likes it or not. And with politicians, I remember with my personal experience on city council, where I was speaking with a person who was in chair of our local business association, Chamber of Commerce. And he was kind of wondering, why do we always have to thank these politicians when they didn't do a damn thing to help this project, that project, but they always want to be there, cutting the ribbon and showing up. Said, I think we need to thank them, because if we don't thank them, they could hurt things. And that's definitely possible. Like, helping is hard, but hurting, oh boy, they could really say something, do something. If they didn't do it, man, come here, cut this ribbon. This is really good. Good job. good politician. And I think that when Europe is dealing with this administration, yes, they can hope and pray, and that next administration is going to be better. Who knows what JD Vance really believes? But they don't want to really throw this baby out the window, and being on kind of a diplomatic terms with Daddy Trump is better than to just tell him to go F himself, and we're going to be doing this on our own. Thank you very much. Even though that's exactly what it kind of looks like. But I think the Europeans are concerned that if Trump is told to F off and to go shove it, he's just going to say, well, I guess I can now support Putin openly, because I guess they don't like me. They don't want me. They don't think I'm one of them. Putin likes me. So let's go play with Putin. So I think on that level, diplomacy of like, come on, Donald, you're one of us, is almost like a reminder to him of what America used to be, and trying to prevent America from doing greater damage in this situation.
And I think that would be okay if, in parallel to that, we were taking real decisive leadership and taking really decisive actions towards Ukraine and to push back Russia, and then point to him and say, look, this is what we're actually doing, and this is what's working.
What would be an example of such a decision?
I think the big one has to be this idea of helping Ukraine to close the skies. This is one where I've had various military experts even disagree amongst themselves as to whether it's feasible or not. But closing the sky would be a demonstration of our commitment to the sovereignty and sanctity of Ukrainian territory, and also understanding that there is a hard barrier to the edge of Europe. That hard barrier now is in Ukraine against autocracy and democracy, and that we have a role in protecting that rather than leaving it to Ukrainians to do that, to suffer, the injuries and deaths and destruction from missiles. That would have been a decisive and highly symbolic step. That might have even deterred Putin in some respects from certain actions. But no steps, as far as I can tell, have been taken along those lines. And I understand that's not going to be easy, but I think closing the skies is certainly more realistic than, say, boots on the ground. And indeed, many Ukrainians I've spoken to say, well, what boots on the ground? What NATO? Because Ukraine has the second most powerful army in Europe at this time, or the most powerful if you count Western Europe, Western Central Europe. What can NATO at this point do? What can a reassurance force of European countries actually do on the ground? Well, probably not much more than Ukraine is doing for themselves. They may even kind of get in the way at this point and create further vulnerability and targets for Russia. But closing the skies is a clear demonstration that we're prepared to push back against senseless Russian aggression and, let's face it, war crimes, because most of these missiles are not hitting military targets whatsoever. I think that would be a clear demonstration of supporting the values that we profess and supporting an ally in a way that is entirely legal. I mean, we didn't ask Khrushchev's permission to set up NATO. We didn't ask Yeltsin's permission to extend NATO to European countries, and we should not be deferring to Putin. We should be taking these steps if we think they're the right ones, and not being coerced by him or bullied by Trump into not taking these actions. But I can see why we might need to play a little bit of our own distract and deflect diplomacy with Trump. The time we've got, I wanted to ask you, how bad is this slide? Because, again, as you say, we see so many stories in the media. It's kind of quite difficult to pull the different strands together. But there are certain things that certainly give me some cause for concern beyond the sort of basic headlines that scream. One is the attempt to destroy the separation of powers, essentially, and sack the head of the Federal Reserve, Lisa Cook. That seems like an extremely authoritarian and quite a sort of dangerous move away from, let's say, scientific-led governance. You've got the National Guard that is directly challenging, the authority of local law and order in DC, and that's clearly going to spread to many other cities as well. So how bad is this kind of slide? And now we've got Gavin Newsom talking that, don't be mistaken here, Trump is entirely serious about pursuing a third term.
You know, well, thinking about with the closing skies and then transitioning to the American politics and how all of this feels from here, I feel that if Ukrainian skies were closed by European allies, that would essentially declare Europe to be more or less official party to the war, and that would really bring us into armed conflict, which seems to be, in my observation, something that everybody seems to be consistently trying to avoid. There's just no appetite in the end from even Europeans who are more aware of how they're vulnerable now than ever. But there's just no appetite to go to war with Russia.
No. In fact, avoidance at every conceivable cost is what we're actually seeing.
And that's to me why I kind of feel like listening to you, feeling how I feel, thinking back to my recent stream with Roman Cymbaluk, who is one of more prominent Ukrainian journalists, and we were discussing that the party of peace time has passed, that it's almost like it's time for party of war. And that's just kind of a general political trend that I feel like there's enough people that are saying the kind of things that you're saying, I'm saying, Raman is saying. A lot of people are saying, like, we have to stand up to Russia. We can't just be trying to avoid a conflict at every possible expense. But that really sends a message that there's people who see the conflict with Russia as either unavoidable or as borderline desirable. And I think that this is about going back to what you said about how to deal with a bully. You have to punch a bully in the face. And if that's desirable or undesirable is a beauty in the eye of the bully. But I think that we have a kind of I'm sensing a shift here in the conversation. And I honestly think it's great. I think it's an important conversation to have. And maybe that's how good ideas will emerge. And instead of just trying to figure out how we can avoid conflict with Russia. All right, where did that get us all? Let's assess the situation. And as far as the United States, I think the key word to describe everything that's happening right now is purges, where we see administration that is trying to get rid of anybody who is saying no, who is disagreeing, who is not putting the whatever policy of Trump today or if Secretary of Health RFK Jr. is, then those people get kicked out, fired, let out of the building practically. And we see this happening with right now, most recently, not just with Federal Reserve, which is kind of important, very important, but kind of a little bit distant for a lot of people, but more so what we see with the purges at CDC and mass resignations, which is Center for Disease Control, and that's vaccinations, that's mass health, that's public health issues. So I think those are going to be things that if they don't resonate with American public, then it's interesting what actually will resonate. At what point, which child is going to say that the emperor is naked when all the other adults are going to be like, that's right, like he was not naked before. But I think that's what we're seeing in the United States. And I think that Governor Newsom is showing a lot of leadership, and Governor Pritzker is showing a lot of leadership. I just posted a video on my channel. I love doing it when an American politician will give a rousing speech, and I do it like I do a voiceover. It's good stuff. So check out, if you speak Russian, J.B. Pritzker and Senator Tammy Duckworth. Great veteran senator from the great state of Illinois, gave very rousing speeches. And I see from comments that people are like, yes, I knew it. America is there. There is some America left in that America. Yes, there are some people who at least see that resistance is a way to improve their career opportunities. Fine. That's great. And the only question is the democracy over, or is it not quite over? Because if you ask JB Pritzker, it's not over, because he's got plans, and damn it if anybody's going to stand in his way. He is also from a super wealthy family, and he's, I think, kind of used to getting things his way. And Gavin Newsom is not giving up on democracy either. But we see that this administration, seeing how unpopular its ideas are, is looking at every possible way in its deck of cards to make it harder for people to vote, to change districts in Congress, to avoid president getting impeached for a third time. And then, it could be fourth, fifth, who knows? I mean, it's like 12 days of Christmas with this guy. So he is doing everything he can to help himself. And I think it's important for Democrats in some extent to work together. But there are also good signs, because a couple of days ago, in a special election in like state election district that Trump won in Iowa by like 11 points, this lady, Democrat, won by 10 points running against the Republican. So I think there's a lot of outrage there. And I think that Trump has a really good opportunity to, frankly, overplay his hand, because the way that he's trying to get his districts is by carefully cutting them in such a way that only Republican will have a chance. But it's relying on the fact that people still feel the way they felt a year or two ago, last time there were elections. And so, in 2024. So whether they will feel the same way in 2026 is a very, very old question, because yes, Republicans are going to stay with Trump more than likely, because that's how this cult is built. Everybody who is not a Trump supporter is going to just getting kicked out of Republican Party, basically, because what are you doing here? Democrats don't support Trump anyway. And we're dealing with persuadable voters, independent voters, who to me start to seem more and more like foolish voters, because those people seem to be easiest ones to fool. Because Republicans don't buy anything because they love Trump. Democrats hate Trump, so they're not going to buy anything good there. But it's these independent voters who are just like, I don't know, maybe it's left, maybe it's right. And there's a lot of them. It's a third of people who basically decided that they don't like this kind of way to spend their time. It's not productive. It's aggressive. I'm not going to pay attention to this, and see what happens. Well, we're all watching what happens, and perhaps when there's another pandemic or something else happens, people will feel independent voters will be less likely to get fooled by the next shiny advertisement. But we'll see what happens. I think right now there's, frankly, a lot of fear and a lot of confusion in the United States. People are a little bit confused about who is likely to get punished, who is not likely to get punished, who has time, who doesn't have time, what to do. It's very disorienting. And I think this is where it's important to see leaders stand up and for trust to start to get built one person at a time.
I think this is why Ukraine and what's happening in the US is so interesting. I think it reminds us that democracy is hard and democracy is not inevitable. And we'd fall into that trap of really thinking that you could enjoy the fruits of a pluralist, productive, innovative democracy without actually having to contribute anything. That the equation would be consumption equals nothing, and everything would carry on as normal. I think that lesson is now being learned. Well, it's not being learned, but that lesson is there for people who want to learn it, that consuming is fine, but you need to have some skin in the game. You need to seek to take part in that system, or else you won't have a voice in it. And that abundance will come to an end at some point. And I think Ukraine has shown us methods for fighting it, and the US is showing us at the moment that there's plenty of people who understand that fight, but maybe the critical mass is depleting down to a level that is not healthy, and that this whole left-right thing at its most extreme exposure can erode the kind of trust you talked about. So I think participation, trust, respect, even for the points of view of people who you disagree with, as long as those points of view are rational and done in good faith, I think these are things that hopefully will pull us out of this. But it seems to be touch and go. But that's why I think Ukraine is so important at this point. It shows us a way through this. It shows us that tyrants can be defeated. and that societies can move from a gradient of being, in an extremely dark place, being a colony of a vicious empire, decades, centuries of trying to be erased, endemic corruption as Ukraine had in the 90s, and you can actually move beyond that, and you can develop and evolve. And here's some of the tools and methods that you can embrace to do that. That's certainly why I keep talking about Ukraine, because I think it has some of the solutions we need to the predicaments that we find ourselves in.
And perhaps that solution is Maidan. And I think that's something that is very interesting for me to end our conversation today, Jonathan, because I already look forward to speaking with you next time. But I feel that my Ukrainian viewers believe that the United States is not going to overcome the challenges we're currently facing without some kind of a rebellion uprising like Maidan was. We can discuss the details endlessly. But I feel that Americans, at least at the present moment, are hoping, as it's perhaps Europeans are hoping to avoid Russia, and Americans are hoping to avoid going through Maidan, of trying to fix things with tools that we have available. Because usually, if you don't like government, you just go to the next election and you vote for another person. There's a risk that, like I said, we have administration that is trying to do an end run there and limit people's options and opportunities to create change, which is only going to increase the chances of Maidan eventually occurring. Because when people can't change power, can't change government legally, they will be looking to express their grievances in other ways. And it just seems like pushing the country towards a major conflict and escalation. But that's why people should tune in next week and continue watching Silicon Curtain and Rashkin Report, and Rashkin Report in English, to hear about how it looks from the UK and from here in Wisconsin. Thank you, Jonathan.
We'll talk about the right kind of orange revolution as opposed to the wrong kind of orange revolution.
Totally. We're done. You're listening to Rashkin Report in English and Silicon Curtain. My name is Yuri Rashkin. With me was Jonathan Fink. Take care. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава, смерть ворогам.